The video will begin in a moment. Click the links in the description below to get your copies of my books today. The South Bend Dark Frog Murders is a bold and bloody murder mystery that offers a very compelling look at the degradation of morality and social structure in America and the world, all wrapped in nail-biting entertainment. A must-have for murder mystery lovers everywhere. The Shadow Angel Genesis is the story of a vampire that has spent the past 500 years serving as the Vatican's greatest monster hunter. The true story of Mrs. Claus is a creative but wholesome reimagining of a character that is well known but often overlooked, and one that remembers to keep Christ in Christmas. Thank you for your continued support.
The following presentation is non-profit and is intended for entertainment purposes only. The events of this presentation are non-canon. Pokémon is the property of the Pokémon Company, Nintendo, Game Freak, Creatures Incorporated, and Satoshi Tajiri. Please support the official release. Pokémon, the Dragons of Bloom Island. A KissShipping fanfiction. Written and read by Robert Canter. The rental boat glided across the sparkling ocean waters. The world-famous Pokémon master, Ash Ketchum, was on his way to investigate rumors of an unknown species of Pokémon. The boat was being driven by his wife, Melody. Their destination was an isolated island to the southeast of Kanto. "How much longer until we get there?" asked Ash. "Well, if the coordinates are right, we should be there in the next half hour," replied Melody. "If this turns out to be a wild honchcrow chase, we'll have chartered this boat for nothing." "It won't be a wild honchcrow chase," laughed Melody. "You live a charmed life. You're probably the greatest Pokémon master who ever lived, you saved the world, and you're married to me." Ash had met Melody years ago when his Pokémon journey took him to the Orange Islands. It had been an unforgettable adventure, and not just because he encountered the legendary Pokémon Lugia and saved the world. He would never forget the first time he saw Melody playing the ocarina, or when she kissed him. Years later, after Ash had become world champion, he returned to the Orange Islands to attend a birthday party for an aspiring young Pokémon trainer. Ash had thought he'd be bored to death, but it was during this trip that he bumped into Melody again. One thing led to another, and before Ash knew it, they were in a relationship, and then tying the knot. In the years since they first met, Melody had grown from a cute girl into a very beautiful woman. When the press first heard that the famous Ash Ketchum had been struck by Cupid at last, everyone started calling Melody the Island Nymph. Ash loved her smile, her long dark hair, her soft sun-kissed skin, but it was whenever she started to play the ocarina and dance that he became hopelessly lost. It was always like watching a very beautiful dream play out in real time. She was the kind of woman who could have any man she wanted, and she had chosen him. "Why me? You must have met plenty of other men over the years." "I have, but they weren't you." Today, Melody was wearing a sleeveless cream-colored dress and her sunglasses. Experience had told Ash that she was probably wearing a bathing suit underneath. She didn't have to come on this trip, but she had insisted. Doubtless she had her own motives. None of Ash's Pokémon could ferry 2 adults, so they had to charter a small boat. Pikachu pointed to something on the horizon. In the distance, it looked like a giant pink flower bud. "I think that's just what we're looking for," said Melody. Ash could see how an unidentified species of Pokémon could go unnoticed out here. The island wasn't on any maps and was nowhere near any commonly traveled routes. It might have gone unnoticed forever if one individual hadn't been shipwrecked here. While the man's struggle for survival had made the news, the only person he had told about the unknown Pokémon had been Professor Samuel Oak. Neither Oak nor his grandson Gary could identify the Pokémon that the man had described. Both were very busy at the moment, so Ash had been called in to investigate. Pikachu leapt out onto the sand as soon as Melody brought the boat ashore. Ash climbed out next, and then helped his wife out. "You remember the last time we were on a beach like this?" asked Melody, beaming. Ash certainly did. He had just finished up with that kid's birthday party when he bumped into Melody. Once he realized who she was, she asked if they could spend some time catching up. An offer that Ash gratefully accepted. Since Ash had nothing better to do, that single afternoon turned into a week. At the end of that week, he and Melody had been walking down a beach a lot like the one they were on now. Melody had pulled out her ocarina and started to play. Ash didn't think it was possible, but she was even more beautiful than she had been on the first day they met. "When I came looking for you, I wasn't sure you'd remember me. I'm really glad that you did." Ash may have been a seasoned Pokémon master, but he was still pretty dense when it came to women, which was why Melody had made the first move. When she kissed him right on the mouth, Ash knew she wasn't just playfully flirting with him. From that night on, the whole thing snowballed. "So, what's the plan for finding this unknown Pokémon?" asked Melody. "I'll have Lucario use his abilities to sniff it out," replied Ash. "He should be able to find it before sunset." "Why don't you just use a Pokémon that knows sweet scent?" asked Melody. "Make it come to us." "That could work, but it will also attract every other Pokémon on the island. Islands like this are usually populated by grass, flying, water, and bug-type Pokémon, with a few oddities here and there. I'm sure you don't relish the idea of being attacked by a swarm of angry Beedrills." "Are you saying your Pokémon aren't strong enough to protect you and your pretty little wife from a few giant bugs?" asked Melody, teasing him. "I don't doubt that my Pokémon can handle anything that comes our way," said Ash. "But if we get into a big fight with every other Pokémon on this rock, it will scare our real target away." "You're the expert," said Melody, fiddling with her sunglasses. Ash released Lucario from his Pokéball and told him to search for any unusual aura signatures. When Lucario indicated that there were none in the immediate vicinity, they set off into the jungle. As the party made their way through the dense foliage, Melody noticed that her husband kept looking over his shoulder. "You worried that the unknown Pokémon is teasing us?" "No, I just keep expecting Team Rocket to jump out and try to steal Pikachu." Ash had told his wife about how he was harassed by Team Rocket on an almost daily basis since the day his Pokemon journey began. Then one day, after what seemed like decades, they just stopped. Ash couldn't help but wonder what had become of them. What would they have even done with Pikachu if they had successfully stolen him? Ash was careful to mark their trail as they made their way. Over the course of his Pokemon journey, he and his traveling companions had gotten lost more times than he cared to count. The jungle was filled with exotic-looking flowers, and their combined scents hung in the humid air. There were plenty of wild Pokemon on the island, but so far there were none that Ash hadn't already seen before. At one point they did discover a Beedrill hive, but carefully avoided it. After about an hour of searching, Melody made her request. "Carry me." "What? Why?" asked Ash. "Because I'm tired." Ash was tired too, but he knew his wife wouldn't take that as a valid argument. "Come on, it's not like anyone is looking," said Melody, smiling. "Pikachu and Lucario are looking." "Are you saying you don't trust them?" All Ash could do was pull a protein bar out of his backpack, grin, and bear it. Both Pikachu and Lucario laughed when he picked up Melody and carried her princess style. He couldn't help but blush as one of his hands came into contact with her soft and warm legs. It only got worse when he smelled her hair and perfume. Satisfied, Melody wrapped her arms around Ash's neck and rested her head against his shoulder. "Isn't this nice? We haven't done this since our honeymoon." Ash had carried Melody for about a half hour when Lucario brought the party to a halt. Ash put Melody down and silently inquired of Lucario what he detected. Lucario subtly raised his hand, indicating that their quarry was above them. To the naked human eye, there was nothing to see but trees, on whose branches were pink flowers with purple vines. "I don't see anything," said Melody. "Pokémon can be tricky," said Ash. "For years everyone thought that Mew was extinct, but it can shapeshift into any other Pokémon. Kecleon can camouflage itself. Zorua, and its evolved form, Zoroark, can create illusions." At Ash's signal, Lucario fired an aura sphere into the trees. Before one of the branches fell to the ground, something that had looked like a big vine detached itself, revealing a serpentine dragon, roughly 3 feet in height. The creature had little wings that kept it afloat. The back of its purple body was covered with a plume of what looked like pink flower petals. Ash's Rotom phone confirmed what he already knew. "Pokémon unknown! No available data." Before Ash could give another order, the unknown Pokémon was already on the attack. It let out a soft cry and shot a jet stream of fire at them. Pikachu and Lucario dodged, and Ash instinctively tackled Melody out of the way. "I don't think now's a good time," she joked. The Pokémon must not have been much of a fighter, because it started flying in the opposite direction. "Follow that dragon!" said Ash. Ash and the others had barely gotten back up and gone 15 feet when the unknown Pokémon started glowing. Suddenly, the jungle seemed to come alive around them. Vines came flying off the trees, and they stopped the party in their tracks. Unfortunately, Pikachu's first instinct was to shock them, along with everything else in the immediate vicinity. The vines released them, and they all came crashing to the ground. "You are so lucky that you didn't ruin this dress," said Melody, scolding Pikachu. As soon as the party had dusted themselves off, Ash told Lucario to pick up the trail. Melody could see that her husband was now in full trainer mode. Now that he had seen the unknown Pokémon, he was determined to have it. Always on the move. Ash was usually off looking for new Pokémon or training for the next big competition. But Melody would rather have a husband who was off doing things as opposed to one who sat on his butt all day. It did, however, get lonely when he was gone for long periods of time. "I'll fix that," she thought to herself. It took 15 minutes for them to catch up to the unknown Pokémon, but something in Lucario's expression told Ash that the situation had changed. "What is it?" he asked. Lucario held up 2 digits. "There's 2 of them?" Before Lucario could give an affirmation, a transparent multicolored beam shot through the trees, which Ash knew to be a Dragon Pulse attack. The attack had been a warning shot. The Pokémon that emerged from the trees looked like the last one, only its serpentine body was white, the petals that made up its plume were blue, and it had little horns on its head. The same species, but some kind of gender dimorphism, like with Unfazant? I'm sure the professor will tell me all about it after he's had a chance to examine them. The purple dragon they had encountered earlier emerged from the trees and came to the aid of the white one. The petals that made up its plume began to glow, then it opened its mouth and fired a beam of green light, clearly a solar beam. Both Pikachu and Lucario dodged sharply to the side. "Pikachu, come back!" Based on their appearance and the attacks that they were using, Ash guessed that these unknown Pokémon were half Dragon type and half Grass type, a unique combination seldom seen in the Pokémon world. If that were indeed the case, Pikachu's electric attacks weren't going to do much of anything. Fortunately, Ash had just the Pokémon on hand to deal with this situation. "Go, Glalie!" Glalie appeared in a burst of white light beside Lucario. The wild Pokémon didn't waste any time. Both opened their mouths and unleashed flamethrower attacks. Glalie spun out of the way, and Lucario dodged. "Lucario! Aura Sphere Barrage!" Lucario unleashed a whole wave of Aura Sphere attacks, intent on hurting the 2 dragons together and keeping them off balance. Ash waited until the 2 dragons were on top of each other. "Glalie! Ice Beam!" Glalie's attack struck the dragons and did visible damage, but didn't freeze them. The purple dragon's eyes started glowing. At first, Ash thought it was going to try that vine trick again, but then dozens of little turquoise embers appeared around the battlefield and started swarming around Lucario and Glalie like angry insects. The white one executed a Dragon Rush attack that sent Glalie bouncing through the trees like a pinball. The white dragon then turned its attention on Lucario, hitting him dead on with a flamethrower attack. Ash could see that Lucario had reached his limit. "Lucario, return!" Ash hadn't expected the unknown Pokémon to be this tough. He wasn't even sure if this was their final evolution or just their base stage. More questions for the Oaks to answer. Now, it was time to end this. "Go! Noivern!" Noivern emerged from his Pokeball just as Glalie returned to the battlefield. "Noivern! Hurricane!" Noivern began flapping his wings furiously. Within moments they started glowing, and then released a powerful gust of wind at his opponents. "Now, Glalie! Blizzard!" Glalie fired a huge blizzard at the dragons, both of which sank to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, Ash threw 2 Pokeballs. Once the balls absorbed their targets, they jiggled around on the ground for about 10 seconds, and then pinged. Having acquired his unknown Pokémon, Ash was as happy as a kid who opened their birthday presents to find the one toy they had been praying for. Amidst his exclamations of joy, he actually picked Melody up and spun her around in the air a few times. She willed him to make a move right then and there, but he sat her back down, much to her disappointment. "We should hurry back to the boat. Don't forget, they're charging us by the hour." As they made their way back to the boat in silence, Melody's annoyance turned into obvious frustration, but only Pikachu seemed to notice. "Time to bring in the big guns." When the boat finally came into sight, Melody made her move. You've been very quiet. Still thinking about your new Pokémon? Of course I am, replied Ash. It's not every day that you discover a new species. There are hardly any half-grass type, half-dragon types to begin with. Then there's that unknown attack they used. Ash heard something that sounded like the rustling of cloth behind him. He turned around and saw that Melody had slipped out of her dress, revealing that she was wearing a stunning new blue bikini underneath. With her hands, she tantalizingly emphasized herself. What are you thinking about now? Melody saw her triumph in her husband's face. I think we can afford to stay a little longer. You caught your Pokémon, but can you catch me? Without another word, she ran down the beach, giggling all the way. Pikachu, mind the boat.
Vika Vika, Pikachu.
Can't make any promises, replied Ash.